Hello everyone, Latham here, Mark and Cora's channel. I'm coming to you this evening with a posting that I've wanted to do now for a number of weeks, and there are many different ways to approach this subject, and I thought long and hard about what would be the best way to bring it to the attention on YouTube. I suppose my main objective is to wake up Jehovah's Witnesses to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the organisation that they belong to has got this subject matter completely wrong, that they are completely out of their depth, that they haven't got a clue really what they're talking about. What am I talking about? I'm talking about rape. Now, in a minute I'm going to be reading some quotes which I would encourage all ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and Jehovah's Witnesses alike to go to watchtowerfacts.com, and if you look under "being raped can be fornication," you'll get some very interesting quotes there, which I'm going to read in a second. What I wanted to start with is something that I did some research on, and although I'm going to now quote to you a particular experience, this can be mirrored across the whole of the world. This isn't just about this particular case, it could be mirrored anywhere at any time. So please remember that when I'm reading this to you. I'm reading this to you for a reason. I'm not going to go into graphic detail because there is no need, but you'll get the picture from what I'm actually saying. It's from the Independent newspaper. It's a broadsheet in this country, and it's under the title of Bosnia War Crimes. It says this in the title: "The rapes went on day and night. Robert Fisk in Mostar gathers detailed evidence of the systemic sexual assaults on Muslim women by Serbian White Eagle gunmen." And I'm just going to quote one small part of this, and it really it is relevant to what I'm going to talk about in a second. "The worst moment in Zeba's life occurred when a dozen drunken Serbian militiamen stormed into the school gymnasium, in which she and more than 100 other young Muslim women were being held, along with their infant children. They came in with guns and grenades, and they screamed at all of us. Zeba's friend Amir recalls the Chetniks shouted at us, 'Look at how many children you can have. Now you're going to have our children. You're going to have our little Chetniks,' they said. They weren't interested in women who were expecting babies because they couldn't make them pregnant. Zeba, who is 26, mother of 2, was among the first 12 women and girls to be selected by the Serbs at the Kalinovic camp. They called us bitches and one of them pointed at me," said Zeba. "My 2 children were clinging to me and I was forced to leave them. They thought I was going to be killed." Zeba and 11 other young women, the youngest, Sanella, was only 16, were driven to Kalinovic's only hotel. 5 of the women, including Zeba, were from the eastern Bosnian town of Gacko, the rest from the Kalinovic itself. They made us clean the rooms in the hotel, they made us wash the floors, then they gave us food at some tables," Zeba recalls. "It was all planned for us. No one was shouting anymore. They gave us bread and meat and water, and after the food they told us to go with them to the rooms. 2 Chetniks took me upstairs. They were both drunk, both dirty. They had huge beards which were filthy. I could smell the drink on their breath. I asked if I would see Yasmin and Murnus, these are her 2 infant boys, again, and one of them said I would. I was terrified they were going to kill the children while I was in the hotel. Then one of the two Chetniks told me to undress. He said if I didn't do what they wanted, they would cut my throat. And I believed them. So they raped me, one after the other. It took about half an hour. Then they took me out and put me with the other women who had been brought back from the other rooms. We were all told to clean the hotel again, and after we had done this, they would take us back to the gymnasium. From that day, it never stopped. The rapes went on day and night for a month. There's a lot more detail in that. This is back in the early 90s, the Bosnian war that was going on. As I said, in this particular instance, it was Muslim women that were being systematically raped in masses. But this happens in Africa. It's even happening now in India. And we have some examples of that, don't we, on the news. So it's a real worldwide problem. And the United Nations are now taking it very seriously and actually starting to see this and recognise it officially as a war crime. And they are now chasing these people for the things that they have done to these women. So what does the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society have to say about rape? As I said, there are many angles that I could take this particular subject matter on, but I've decided to just quote you some of the stuff from watchtowerfacts.com so that you can read this stuff for yourself, have a look at it, and decide for yourselves whether or not I'm just talking a load of rubbish, or whether or not the Watchtower really does have it wrong. It starts off by saying this, and it's a quote that isn't from the Watchtower. It says, "The Watchtower teaches that a person raped is considered to have committed fornication if they do not scream and do everything possible to resist." Based on a single scripture from Deuteronomy, by far the majority of articles on rape contain the sentiment that if a woman does not do enough to resist, she has committed fornication and loses her clean standing with God. In recent years, this attitude has been toned down but continues to persist. The Watchtower opinion of women and rape in the following articles is terribly disturbing. In particular, the parts highlighted in bold in this particular, and you can read this for yourselves. A reader cannot help but wonder what type of brothers wrote these articles and then the unnecessary guilt it has placed upon witness victims of rape. Now there's a lot here, but what I'm going to do is, rather than read all of these pages that I've printed off, is probably go to just the bold areas and maybe just a little bit around it, so it gives you a flavour of what we're dealing with here. Ah dear, oh dear, where do I start? Okay, and this is taken from Watchtower 1964, January 15. But suppose the man had a weapon and threatened to kill the girl if she failed to lie down with him. These scriptures do not weaken the argument or alter the situation by citing any circumstances that would justify her in not screaming. It plainly says she should scream. And of course this is taken from Deuteronomy chapter 22. This is 23 to 27. Oh, by the way, we're not under law. Do you remember that? We're not under law anymore. That's why Jesus Christ came to the earth. I'm sure we all remember that. But they wish to follow the principles of Deuteronomy 22. So if she was overpowered and perhaps knocked unconscious and violated before help came in answer to her screams, she could not be held accountable. That's what it says. The thought of the scriptures apparently is that the girl's screaming, by attracting neighbourhood attention, would frighten off her assailant and would save her, even though he threatened her life for not quietly complying with his wishes and, ready, passionate desires. They've called rape a man raping a woman as passionate desires. Okay, let's read on. Such scriptural precedents are applicable to Christians who are under command. Flee from fornication. 1 Corinthians 6:18. Thus, if a Christian woman does not cry out and does not put forth every effort to flee, she would be viewed as consenting to the violation. The Christian woman who wants to be clean and obey God's commandments, then, if faced with this situation today, needs to be courageous and to act on the suggestion made by the scriptures and scream. Actually, this counsel is for her welfare. If she should submit to the man's passionate wishes, she would not only be consenting to fornication or adultery, but be plagued by the shame. That's what it says in here about a woman being raped. She would be plagued by the shame, man's passionate wishes. Let's go back to the other one. Passionate desires, passionate wishes. She would not only be consenting to fornication or adultery, but be plagued. She would be consenting under rape because she didn't scream. That's what it's saying. Let's read on. Watchtower 1968, June 1st. I'm going to just read down a bit here. Would it be different if the man had a weapon and threatened to kill you if you did not submit? No. The scriptures plainly state that Christians are under obligation to flee from fornication. It is true that you face the possibility of death in this case, but you have no guarantee that if you meekly submit, your assailant will not kill you anyhow to avoid identification. And it's talking about a case here where someone might have a weapon and whether or not they should fight as a result of that. So by no means would it be proper quietly to submit to rape, as that would be consenting to fornication. 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 3. That's what it says in the Watchtower 1968 magazine. That, I'll just quote it again, so by no means would it be proper quietly to submit to rape, as that would be consenting to fornication. I tell you. Let's read a bit more. Okay. This is another paragraph now that we're going into, which is the Awake 1974, and it says the following. She told him that marriage was honourable before God and that she was married, but that what he wanted to do was not honourable. Also that if she did not scream, she would ruin her relationship with Jehovah God and the Christian congregation, and then she would be disfellowshipped or excommunicated from it, and that this would be worse than being killed as far as she was concerned. Have I just read that? Is that real? Jehovah's Witnesses, please, you have to look at this stuff. This is the Awake 1974. They've planted that in there, that unless she screams and she's raped, she could be disfellowshipped for this. I'll come on to that in a minute, about whether or not that is real. I have the Shepherd book in front of me, the book that doesn't exist, the Elders book, and we'll look up that in a second under the heading of Judicial Matters. Rape. Okay, let's move on. Womankind must share the blame. It's under the title of Why the Increase in Rape. And it says here, that womankind must share the blame. To begin with, until the age of 5 or 6 years, the most vital period, little boys have their personalities moulded largely by women, their mothers. Womankind must share the blame for rape. That's what it says in the Awake magazine of 1974. Okay, why don't we move on a little bit further? Before we do, can I just stop there and look at that again? I mean, I'm shocked. No matter how many times I read this stuff, I'm shocked. I've not prepared to just, I've not done a script on this. I'm just reading it to you as I'm reading it. And I have read this a number of times, but if you're disfellowshipped for being raped, how can you show regret for being raped? How can you be reinstated after being disfellowshipped for rape? How do you show regret for something that had nothing to do with you? Can you see my point, Jehovah's Witnesses? I hope so. Because what this constitutes, what they're saying here, is that that's a gross sin. Being raped is a gross sin. Not my words, theirs. It's plain and simple. It's there in the writing. Oh wait, 1984, February 22nd. It says here that resisting the rapist, but the rapist is asking a person to break God's law by committing fornication. Under such circumstances, a Christian is obligated to resist. Okay, 1 Corinthians 6:18. That's what it's saying. That's the scriptures that they are misapplying here. Is fornication rape? Is it really? Is it really rape, fornication? Really? Think about that for a second. Okay, I hope you're sitting down for this next bit, because this is incredible. Okay? This is also from the Awake magazine, 1984. And it's under the title, Treat Him Respectfully. The intended victim should remember that the rapist is a human. No doubt there are circumstances in his life that have precipitated his behaviour. So although a woman should not cower in fear and permit a rapist to intimidate her, at the same time she should treat him understandingly, as a fellow human. That's what it says. Treat him as a fellow human. Treat him with understanding. In other words, treat him respectfully as you're being raped. That's what it says in the Awake 1984 magazine. As you're being raped. Treat him with respect. Not my words. These are the words that you can find in your own magazines. Awake 1989. And I quote just a bit in part. I quote, "It was then that I remembered the scripture in Deuteronomy chapter 22, and it says that if a woman does not cry out when attacked, it indicates she is submitting to the man and is committing a sin against Jehovah. Also I remember what I read in the Awake article, Rape, How Can You Protect Yourself?" Anyway, I thought I have got to scream and resist him for all I'm worth. So I shouted, "Jehovah, help me," over and over again, and it kept it up. And when the rapist pulled my hands to the right, I pulled to the left. And when he pulled me forward, I pulled backwards. And when he covered my mouth to try and stop me from screaming, I bit him. At any rate, I kept on resisting. Gradually I got tired. It was getting difficult for me to breathe, and I thought my heart was going to stop, but I continued to do it. I could resist him and kept on calling out to Jehovah to help me. As a result, the rapist gave up. walked hurriedly to the floor and went out. I believe that I was able to avoid being raped because of Jehovah's help, and because of applying what I read in the Awake magazine. Had I not read the Awake article, I think that out of fear I would have kept quiet and most likely done just as the criminal said. Thank you very, very much. Is this real stuff? Are these real people? Are they? Are they really? Okay. I'm going to stop there, because what this is talking about here, when you look at this stuff, are Christians under the Mosaic law? It says here on page 7 of this particular document, although Christians today are not under the Mosaic law, the principles mentioned therein provide them with guidance. The above account underscores the importance of resisting and screaming for help. Even in the sad cases where a woman is overpowered and raped, her struggle and screaming for help is not in vain. On the contrary, it established that she did all that she could possibly do to resist her attacker. Despite going through this ordeal, she can still have an undefiled conscience, self-respect, and the assurance that she is clean in God's eyes. Okay, she can have, if she's fought, an undefiled conscience. She can have self-respect. She can have assurance that she is clean in God's eyes. Okay, that's what it says. There are many, many other things that you can read from this document. I would strongly advise you to go ahead and have a look at that. Why am I mentioning this? They're completely out of their depth. These brothers who wrote these articles have no idea about the real world that we all live in. They have no idea the circumstances that are considered when it comes to every violation of rape, male or female, old or young, fit or disabled. Rape is rape. The dictionary version for rape is a crime of forcing a woman to have sexual intercourse against her will. 2. The crime of sodomizing a person against his or her will. 3. Violation, despoiling or abuse. Forcing. It is not committing fornication when you are forced into something that you did not want to do. Where they have misapplied the scriptures is they are saying that you're still guilty of fornication if you have not struggled. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Under this book, the Shepherd, the Flock of God book, if we go to, let's look at now, page 58, determining whether a judicial committee should be formed. That's the title of this page. So, should we get the elders together to make a judgment? Oh yes. On page 59, it talks about one who was raped. And I quote, "One who was raped would not be guilty of porneia." Ready for this? Discernment is needed in considering claims of rape, taking into consideration such factors as the mental disposition of the person. That's what it says. The circumstances that led up to the incident. That's what it says. And any delay in reporting. In all cases involving the possibility of porneia, is this porneia? A woman or a man being raped? They're making a judgment on you because you might have been raped. You've taken it to the elders and they're now going to make a judgment of whether or not you are guilty of porneia. Based on those magazines, that's where they're going for their advice. Yes, it is. That's why they're written. It is the responsibility of the judicial committee to use the scriptures to weigh carefully the facts in each case. We know which one that is, don't we? 1 Corinthians about fleeing from fornication. Did you flee when you were raped? Because if you didn't, according to this, you could be judged. It says it here. The responsibility is especially serious when it involves the scriptural freedom to remarry. In situations in which the elders are uncertain or divided on the conclusions, it is best to write to the branch office. Page 60, that part in the Flock of God book. Okay, going back to this lady, Ziba. I have looked at some other war crimes that are happening in places like Eritrea, Chad, Ethiopia, Nigeria, places in Africa where there are many war-torn areas where it's run by warlords. There are many Christians in those areas that are being ransacked, their villages, towns, schools, hospitals being burnt, the men being executed, the women being taken off with their children. What for? To be systematically raped en masse. Can you imagine the advice that some of those Christians who may be Jehovah's Witnesses, if they follow the advice in those magazines, how far do you think they're going to get when they're trying to protect their children, when everything around them, the establishment that they had, their hospitals, their schools, their husbands, their families are all gone? All they've got left is the children they're still trying to protect, and the only reason they're still alive is because they're going to be raped. Can they protect their children? Many of the rapists that are involved in this type of crime are just children themselves. Some of them as young as 10, 12, 14 years of age, high on drugs, carrying AK-47s with them. No morals. Where is the Watchtower advice then? It's not there, brothers and sisters, and it's not there because this scale of this whole subject matter of rape is something the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society has not got a grip on. It has no idea what it's talking about. It's even directing that at just city goers, people that may live in a city somewhere. It has no idea of the real world of rape. They live in a bubble. And then at the end of it, you've got men that are supposed to come together and make a judgment on someone that's put their hand up and been brave enough to say, I've been raped, and now they could be judged again. They could be judged after being humiliated and violated. They could be judged again by 3 men who weren't there. Can you see what we're getting at here? This is very serious. I would strongly recommend anybody to read this information. Go on the World Wide Web, look at Google, look at the war crimes and violations that are going on around the world, and see exactly where the so-called Watchtower, God's channel on earth, see how up to date it really is when it comes to fornication and rape. They really do disgust us for the things that they've come out with and the advice that they're giving. We're not saying it's wrong to struggle and fight tooth and nail if the circumstances permit for that, and if the person, the victim, feels as though that is the best way forward for them. Fine. There is no right and wrong to this. Rape is rape. It's against their will, whether or not they remain silent or they throw the kitchen sink at the individual. It's still rape. Thank you for listening.